dive into our 2026 watch lists, we have a very special guest who knows exactly how to bring real-world terror to the screen.
He is a filmmaker who doesn't just show you monsters. He shows you the monsters that live next door. Whether it's the brutality of Pig Killer or the psychological weight of Ed Kemper, his work is unflinching.
He's here tonight because his new film, Dorothea, under Epic Pictures' Dread label, is officially unearthing the secrets of the death house landlady, Dorothea Puente. It's a chilling look at how real evil hides behind a grandmother's smile.
And rumor has it he's already moving on to another nightmare, a biographical dive into the Night Stalker himself. I'm sure we might have some questions about that.
And we're incredibly honored to have him with us to kick off the new year. Please welcome our featured guest for the evening, the writer and director, Chad Ferrin.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I was doing the silent clap.
We have an audio bit that we're not good at using, but that would have been perfect timing.
Oh,
so,
yeah, I forgot about that.
You want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and your film.
Dorothea is the latest one. The other true crime film before that was Ed Kemper, which Epic has also put out. And then Pig Killer was my first foray into true crime. And it's been a blast. I mean, I moved, from different genres, whether it's, sci-fi horror with Lovecraft or, giallo with Nightcaller. I kind of shift around which, avenues of horror to dabble in. And so far, so good with true crime. It's been the most popular of the films I've been doing. So I'm kind of staying in that niche.
There's definitely a true crime that I fall into that category. I watch a lot of true crime. I actually first discovered the Dorothea Puente story on the Netflix Worst Roommate Ever documentary series, and that's where I discovered her story. So where did you discover her story, and what kind of brought you around to bringing it to screen?
It started, a friend of mine, Gerard McMahon, a musician, just a great guy all around. He was good friends with Sharon Stone. And he was telling me that, hey, Sharon's over right now. We're recording a song and, she's just a great person. I'm like, hey, would she be interested in, a lower budget project? I might have something for her. He's like, oh, yeah, when you're ready, send it over. So I immediately got online and started looking up female serial killers and came across Dorothea Puente. And the script was born. I, wrote it in a couple of weeks, had a really fun time diving in and discovering about her crimes and who she was and all that stuff. And then the idea was, to get it to Sharon Stone and make this big movie and climb out of the gutter. And so I finished it, sent it to him. He thought it was great, sent it to her. She loved it. And we kind of started going, into a bigger budget, bigger, film and kind of ironing that all out. And then it got in with her manager and agents and, all these kind of different things that I was like, that's fine. And suggestions and notes and, bigger budget than even what we had in mind of what I could possibly raise. And it just kind of became one of those things where I started feeling not comfortable. I like the kind of a comfort zone. I like to control the, these smaller budget films and have, just a freedom to making them without confines. And I knew that direction of going with her was going to be just filled with confines and things that I'm not used to or didn't even want to get into at this age. So I called up Susan Priver, who I had worked with previously on Ed Kemper. And I said, hey, take a look at this script, see if you're interested in it. And she loved it. And we were off and making it, a month later.
I did notice that she played Ed Kemper's mother in the Ed Kemper film and then was Dorothea in this one. I wondered, watching it now, hearing your story, I wonder differently, but still, we see directors return to a lot of actors because they work well together. And watching it, I wondered if that was the case in this one, if you just work really well with her and thought she would be a great fit for it.
Yeah, no, I work great with her and, she's a great actress and just a good energy on set. I mean, half of the time, whether someone's a great actress or a great actor, if they're a pain in the ass, I'd rather have, a mediocre actor than, someone. But she, is both. She's a great actress and a a good person and, fun to be around and doesn't complain and doesn't, hits her mark, knows her lines, and, 2 takes and we're out of there. When you're shooting these things for, on $100,000 budget in 10 days, there's really not much time to find an actor or to coddle them or to say, give them motivation speeches for an hour. I need people who are going to get there. They're going to show up. They're going to be good. They're going to, and hit their marks and have a smile at the end of the day. And she hits all those boxes, and it's, always a pleasure to work with.
Awesome.
I have a question.
Anyone else has other questions?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
I can jump in here. Hi, Chad. Aaron here from A&B Horror Movies. When you choose a true crime story, what elements of the individual's lives do you decide to focus in on? So there's a lot of material, right, that you can consider. So like with Ed Kemper, you focused on his relationship with his mother. With Dorothea, you focus on her sort of defense mechanism if anyone gets too close or whenever she senses sort of, I don't know, something might change her way of life, then she acts upon that. So how do you choose those nuggets like that you can really gravitate and hold on to in the film?
Well, like with Ed Kemper, it was kind of, things that I could relate to of having a difficult time with my mother as a child, and things that I could draw on that I've experienced. And then also knowing that, Susan was going to be in it and kind of just focusing more of her dynamic with Ed. And, and still the script from Stephen Johnson was fantastic, but it was a much bigger budget. So when I got it, it was kind of just honing it down to a smaller budget and then working it more of the dynamic with, the mother and son relationship, which is something I could totally relate to. And, it's with any of these scripts or these projects, it's finding elements of the character that I personally can draw, whether it's inspiration from or relate to them from. With Richard Ramirez was a tough one because the really only thing that I could relate to him with was his love of horror films, or, he was a big Dark Shadows fan. So, things like that I could kind of like, okay, I can get behind that. And, he had a fucked up, childhood. I can kind of work with that. But very slim elements to relate to with him. I mean, it's really one of the most disturbing scripts I've ever written, and the research doing on him was, exhausting. And the film will be again a very harrowing experience for all involved.
And I just want to ask one more thing. So how do you disconnect from all the research and writing a screenplay that's so the material is so difficult? Does that sort of creep into your daily life, or is it easy for you to step back and not think like Richard Ramirez?
Well, no, the great thing is, I've been lucky to get at least, 2 to 3 projects a year, and they kind of go quick. Like Dorothea, once that was done, we went into shooting Sunset Strip Killers, and I just finished that, and Epic Pictures just picked that one up as well. And then, in that interim, I was writing Night Stalker, and it was just kind of, I was able to kind of disconnect quickly from Night Stalker, jumping into Sunset Strip Killers and then shooting that. And then once we finished that and finished the post on that, and then I'm got back into Richard Ramirez, and we just finished casting, and we start shooting February 9th. So it's one of those things where it's kind of a whirlwind, and the horror of writing it and learning all about him, every detail. And, and the film is basically, the audience gets in with Richard Ramirez from the get-go, and you're going into 14 different victims, and you're raping them, you're shooting the husband, you're killing people. It's nonstop. I mean, it's fucking Fulci, true crime all the way. So for me to kind of disconnect it, I try to get the excitement level of, again, taking the reality of it and making it more in my mind as a fiction piece. I'm like, okay, New York Ripper and, certain things that I have to try to, take away the fact that this shit really happened and went down, and it's some fucked up shit. But I mean, there's been fucked up shit happening since the dawn of time. Should we not make entertainment from it? If that were the case, there would never be any Civil War movies. There'd never be any World War II movies. So when people try to shit on me about, making something and not being as sympathetic to victims or whatever it is, I try to just disconnect from that and say, look, I'm just trying to make something as accurate as possible and entertaining as possible and on a nickel budget. And and if that finds an audience and a voice, and someone is basically able to say, man, that's some fucked up shit that he did to that woman or whatever. And then they research it and they learn about it and they dig deeper than whatever, documentary they may have seen or whatever they may have read about him. It's something that I think, the knowledge or interest that's piqued in certain things, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, is something that, learning is a great thing, and especially in cinema, when you come across something and then you're like, oh, I like that director, and you start researching his other films and you found out what they made that on or the things they did. You go down different rabbit holes, and it's the same thing with true crime. You can either obsess about the victims, or you can figure out, why did Ramirez do this? What were the things that kind of led to these things? And to me, it's just kind of, the psychological aspects are very interesting and exciting and entertaining. I mean, that's why, Forensic Files, or, all these different shows that you kind of fall into, they're so Unsolved Mysteries or whatever. They're very interesting and exciting, and they have a huge audience that, I'm thrilled to be a part of in whatever small way that I am. And, to me, it's just trying to make something that I find exciting, that hasn't been done before. I mean, there's been other Ramirez films, but nothing, I assure you, nothing like this one.
Well, I just want to say I'm a fan. Count me in. I can't wait to see what's next for you.
You mentioned two of my favorites. I watch Forensic Files and Unsolved Mysteries in the background constantly, because I do find the psychology of this interesting. I don't want to say it's like appealing. It's not. It's horrifying. But there's something about it that is just like, I want to learn and I want to understand, because I am not that person. Right. And to see that somebody could go to those extremes is fascinating to me, to kind of process and try to understand that individual. So you mentioned you try to make something that is extremely factual and extremely entertaining. Where do you draw the line on when something can stretch the truth to be more entertaining, or vice versa?
Well, I think, that's a tough one. I don't think it should be stretched to the point of absurdity. Like, the Ed Gein Netflix film was a little absurd.
Made me mad.
So, but at the same time, there's still factual elements of it. And I find, if you knew that going in, you'd probably be more on board with it. But, when I saw it, I was just kind of taken aback a little bit by it. But, at the same time, there are entertaining facets within it, and with other things that I can kind of say, well, it's not a total piece of shit. It kept me entertained for this. It kept me entertained for that. I'm not one of those guys that spends, watch something and then I go on Letterboxd or IMDb and shit all over it for, hours, calling it the worst thing, worst acting, worst whatever. In every film, good or bad, whether it's fucking Ed Wood or Al Adamson, there are some great stuff in those movies. And I kind of look at the, the determination and the chutzpah they had to make these films and to keep doing it. And whether it's good or bad, or someone calls it the worst piece of shit, I could care less. I find entertainment within them. And, and I think that's what cinema is all about. Not everything has to be Citizen Kane or, 2001. There's some great, schlock, and there's nothing better than, you watch, Magnificent Ambersons, great, amazing movie. And then you turn on fucking Lindsay's Nightmare City, and you're like, okay, this is some fun stuff, So for me, my taste is kind of all over the board, and it's just having a love for cinema. And then when you find out especially if they made it for a nickel and it's got these great things and the time constraints and the actors, going crazy or whatever it might be, and keeping it all together and getting it released. And, those are the things that kind of cement whether a film to me has got merit or not. So.
Very good.
Chad, it's great seeing you again. When you were on the Dread Alert podcast, we talked a lot about your visual influences and those beautiful split diopter shots. I wonder if you'd share that with the group here. What inspired your visual style on Dorothea?
Oh, that's a tough one. Of course, Brian De Palma, was a big influence. So was, whatever happened to Baby Jane, and, any of those kind of older women films that Aldrich, made with Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. Those elements to me are kind of a Grand Guignol style, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with Dorothea, with a little injection of Goodfellas. the talking to the camera and those kind of things. Because for me, it was a great script to write because there was a total freedom of, you're thinking you're making this for a big A-list star, and you're kind of going with this, I don't give a shit what the budget is. I'm not writing knowing that it's, we're making it for a nickel. There was kind of this freedom to kind of just do all these certain things. And then when she left, it was like, okay, now we got to take it back to a nickel, but I don't want to change anything. Let's try and see what making, a creatively free script, it was, in the millions budget for $100,000 budget. And let's see what happens. And, I had a great cast and a great crew, and we kind of pulled it off. And, it's a film I'm very proud of. And, to me, but the beautiful thing about making numerous films, especially in a short succession, is you kind of let it go the minute it's kind of in other hands. Dread's got it, it's off, it's free from me, and I'm on to other projects. So if Dorothea does horribly or it gets shit on critically, I really don't care because I'm on to other things, and I don't let it, get me by, get me down, because before you'd make a film a year or every 4 years or whatever it is, and you'd be near suicide if the film, was getting, shit on or not making money or whatever it is. But now I've kind of, cut those shackles of, giving a crap what the audience thinks or whatever, because I'm on to another film. I'll still look at stuff and reviews and see, oh, that negative review has some good merit. Maybe I'll try, and pick certain things that I can try to learn from in the process. But at the same time, I don't let anything negative on previous films, really bog me down or bother me anymore.
Hell yeah. Don't let haters ruin your vision.
But at the same time, I try to, take in, if someone's got a good comment about something, why don't they call it, killer grannies from whatever? And I'm like, oh, maybe that would have been a better marketing, and you start to kind of question certain things on more of a financial level than anything else creatively. Because, for me, when you get a success, like Ed Kemper has been very successful. For me, it's probably my most successful film. They basically picked up my next two films. They just did a 3-picture deal with me. They're bankrolling Night Stalker and Sam Little, and then Night Stalker Volume 2, which covers his trial and his death in prison. I mean, all these things kind of came together from, Ed Kemper. So Stalker Volume 2. It's the true crime that really kind of launched a solid foundation of my career at this moment. Because before it was kind of like hand to mouth. You'd try to find investors, 10 grand here, 20 grand here, and, scrape at the bottom of the barrel to try to get something together, to get something up on the screen. And then when no one goes and sees it, or it doesn't make any money, it's just like, oh, that's in the toilet. But when you find something that's successful, like true crime, it kind of changes your whole perspective on what I once thought artistically and the merit of things. It became more of, okay, that's a great idea. Sounds like a great film, but is it going to make any money? Is anybody going to want to see it? And I start to kind of weigh things differently than I did before, because after having, something that's somewhat of a successful film. Because so many people, I had someone send me a film because they wanted some advice on selling it and whatever, and they spent like, $500,000, and I'm like, look, it looks good and it's all that stuff, but I don't think you're ever going to make your investors' money back. And that's a tough place to be, because I've been there, and, you get these phone calls at 3 a.m. Where's my fucking money? And, you don't, you're like, look, man, the movie's not doing well. I thought, my first Lovecraft film, the deep ones, would do great. The second one, the old ones, did shit. I'm sorry, I don't have the money to pay you back. And, it's disheartening, but at the same time, it's best to find things, especially for first-time filmmakers or whatever, make sure there's, an audience for it. I hate to be kind of that guy that, you should make what you want to make and put your heart into it and your soul into it. But at the same time, the producer in me is like, make sure that thing can make its money back, or you're going to get investors calling you at 4 in the morning wanting to kill you.
Sounds like a great time.
Make it sound like a dangerous game.
Sounds just like a horror movie in itself. Yes.
Yeah.
Like I find an animal head in your bed and shit. Like, oh my God.
Don't answer the door.
Right.
Well, I'm armed. I have a shotgun and a pistol. So
Sweet. You're good to go. All right. It's like, come and get that money, bitch.
yeah, I'm here all day.
Anybody have more questions for you?
I actually do. I typically do.
What is something that you have learned in the process of making these specifically true crime based films that helps you tackle the next one? So going from Ed Kemper to Dorothea, now to Night Stalker, what are things you learn on one that helps with the next?
Well, I think, one big thing is the connections you make from one film to the other, especially like with the vintage cars and the wardrobe, who Jerry, she did the wardrobe on the last 2 true crime films, and she's just top notch with getting this vintage clothes and all this stuff. And then, the cars and, finding the locations that fit the period. And they have the, pulling in the antique furniture and all the old TVs and all the kind of the fun stuff of this is in just kind of narrowing that down to, instead of renting it from a prop house, it's like buy a TV on eBay for $10 or buy this on that for finding things and kind of amassing them, because that the budget's small and you can't afford to do the typical, rent a truck full of shit. It's like, here, I'll buy half of the shit and then use it on the next movie and the next movie and the next movie. And the people that I've met, whether it's using their classic cars or what locations or whatever it might be, just kind of helps save not only the money, but it also helps in the script writing process, because you're like, oh, I can go back to that location or back to this car, or what are the certain things that you can kind of write in that you have and can kind of pull it off without having to worry about where are we going to get a 1942 Duesenberg or whatever it might be that you need to kind of fill in the script. I kind of just write around what I know and what I've worked with, and kind of let the things that is there at my disposal without a pain in the ass of permits and certain things that will be tough, and just kind of work that in to the script and still give it its same kind of a big feeling, a much bigger budget than the pennies we work with, but not learning from the past films and the things that worked and the people you worked with that worked out well, and just kind of reusing those and repurposing them as it may be.
You're taking me back to my
your
stock theater
period details that you are discussing. Actually, they do make your films seem bigger budget than it sounds like what you're talking about. I was very impressed watching them, because I love period films, and you do an excellent job of capturing that with the budget you're working with. Great. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. I mean, look, to me, that's one of the biggest things as a movie buff. There's nothing that draws me out quicker from any type of, period film that, like The Irishman is a perfect example. Here's a movie that's, $100 million, whatever ridiculous amount of money. And I'm watching this, and at first I can't get past the de-aging bullshit. But then they have a scene with like this 1955, pickup that he's driving. And he's like, it breaks down at the side of the road, and they pop the hood, and it's got like a 1972 radiator cap or something, much newer than 1955. And it totally pulls me out of the movie. And I'm like, what the fuck? They spend all this money, all this stuff. And I mean, maybe, 10 people may have noticed it, but still, that's something that, when you watch enough old television and old movies, and, I used to watch like 5 movies a day, and plus, and, Gunsmoke, Twilight Zone, and every fucking show as a kid. So I'd have a detailed eye on little pieces of whatever, the set might be, whether it's a rotary phone in the back or whatever it is. So I'd kind of know, most people in 1985 wouldn't have a rotary phone, but a lot would, because they didn't switch over. So there's certain things that I nitpick when I do these, and, having the budgets on these, being so small, 90% of the time I'm doing art department as well. So I get all the props, I get all the set decoration, and we kind of just throw it all in together, and then we do this. But it's one of those things I try to meticulously, it's like, oh, there's no 3-prong outlets, get rid of that, or, certain things that, I'm a stickler for that, some people might get and some people might not. But for me, that's an important thing to get it right, just to know that I'm like, it's true to the era for me, and, and not something that someone can call out on for being inaccurate. They may think it's a piece of shit movie, but at the same time, I don't say that, hey, well, I felt the period was correct. They didn't have something else, or whatever it is.
Elise, did you have a question?
All right. Does anybody have one more question before I ask the last one?
Oh, I did have a question. I don't know
Go.
if you can
Yeah.
hear me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if my mic was on or not. Just really quick on the aspects of the period aspect. I did notice in Ed Kemper that the hair, the makeup, the clothing was excellent, and that is something that pulls me out of a movie, a period piece. If the actresses have too full of eyebrows, and I'm just like, okay, that looks too modern, or if their hair looks perfectly blown out and smoothed down, I'm like, no, that really took me out. I mean, I know the Fear Street series has an audience, but that is one that I've noticed. I'm just like, oh, the hair's too perfect. So really great work on the hair, the makeup, and the wardrobe. But I wanted to talk about the with Ed Kemper, that you really made him human for this character who is deplorable and does these really awful things. The dialogue that you have between him and his mother, the little quips that he has back to her, they all seem so real. But there's one moment that I was like, wait, did that actually happen? With the third hitchhiker, where he's kind of bumbling because he's new at this and he locks himself out of the car. Is that something that in your research you discovered? Did this happen, or is this just kind of encapsulating the aura of him being new at this?
Well, that's one of the things. When I first got the script from Mike Muscal, who's produced the original Ed Gein and the Hillside Stranglers, and he had that slew of true crime films in the early 2000s, and he said, "Hey, are you looking for another true crime film? I've got Ed Kemper, written by Stephen Johnson, who wrote Ed Gein." And I'm like, send it over. And he sent it over. And being a true crime fan, I knew about Ed Kemper and I knew a lot about his backstory. And reading the script, I'm like, this is right on point. It's very accurate. It's whatever. I just, again, went through to kind of make it fit our budget and to bump up the mother-son relationship. But then when redoing my research, I came across the story of him, how he locked his keys in the car, and then she ended up letting him out, and his retelling of that whole story. And I'm like, I've got to put that in the script. So I put that scene in as told by Ed in one of his prison interviews. And it was one of those things that also, in doing that, learning and then going back, that, he only had sex with these victims when they were dead. There was never when they were alive or any of that stuff. So he killed them first. And so it was just kind of fixing some of that in one of the other scenes, and, trying to, again, be as true to it as well. And it, again, it's one of those things, it's hard to believe, but, I think when she was so young, she was like 15 years old. And I think, when you look back, even now, I'll look back at things, oh my God, why did I do that? Why did I blow that stop sign? Or why did I do these things that, led to incarceration, or numerous bad choices in your life, or things that if I would have done that, they'd still be alive. Or if I would have done this, I'd still have money. Certain things that, you made a mistake, and, unfortunately, she paid for it. It's one of those things where most of the audience are like, oh my God, grab the gun, shoot him in the face. All these things that you wish you could do, but you didn't do. And whether it's, fate or whatever it is, certain things, you have a split second to react to a lot of things, and you made the wrong choice. And,
and I think the way that you wrote him and the way that he's acted and portrayed by Brandon Kirk, I think he does seem so unassuming. I could see how somebody in his presence would not believe that he'd be capable of doing what he does. And I think that's portrayed well in the film. So nice job.
No, yeah, Brandon, he did a great job. And I think it's one of those things, he really got into it. He studied up Ed Kemper, read the transcripts and all the different research that he did, and watched all the interviews. And, and I think those are the important things if you're doing a true crime, especially for an actor, to get into that character as much as possible. And, like Peter Mendoza, who's playing Richard Ramirez in the next one. He's lost 20 pounds. He's going into a very, very, very dark place. And, that's, something to talk to him about it afterwards, to see, getting into that, especially seeing he's a little on the method side of acting, and, knowing how dark you have to go, and, how hard it is to turn it off and to come back to reality.
And at a certain point, you have to kind of keep an eye on him, like, hey, everything all right?
Look, I try to stay as far from actors and people as possible until we get on set. And then it's like, okay, let's do this. And there's a full energy and a thing, a general, I don't think, wants to hang out with troops, before the war. But once they're in war, they kind of get all buddy and commiserate on the misery of the whole aspect or the joy of it or whatever it might be. But before that, it's like I had one meeting with them. We had lunch. We discussed, my thoughts on it and, what I'm okay with. And, I'm like, look, Peter, go as far as you want. You've got the freedom to do that. If it's wrong, I'll say, hey, let's do it this different way. But, I'm very open to kind of seeing what you come up with. And I want to be surprised by it. I don't want to rehearse the hell out of it or write a whole bunch of bullshit camera shots that we're not going to use anyway because the location is 10 times smaller than it was in your head. So you kind of just, for me, it's kind of a free-flowing thing. You hope that everyone kind of, buckled down, did the research, and it's ready to go with a hard on and make this motherfucker. Or, and you go in there full thing and take what it comes to you. Without having it all pre-planned. I mean, I already know one of the locations is a real ball buster. So when we get there and, they start saying, hey, you can't do this or you can't do that, or we just heard gunshots, then you kind of just switch what your mind vision of it was and say, okay, now we got to kind of do this a little softer or a little quieter before we get the police called on us. And, so for me, it's just kind of, taking it as it comes kind of way without kind of over-analyzing it and overthinking it. All the overthinking it and analyzing was done in the writing of the script, kind of pulling it all together. But once on set, there's kind of a freedom to what comes with what may. And, if an actress is like, what, I'm not going to do this nudity. And I'm like, well, you said you're going to be buck naked and sodomized and thrown over the thing. And then, all these different things. Then you changed your mind. So instead of screaming about it, I would try to figure out a way to make her comfortable and make it work. And a lot of the times the scenes come out better, than you would have even imagined because you're open-minded to, whatever they.
Tim, can I jump in with one last question? I have to ask.
Well,
I have to ask.
This will be your last.
It's kind
this
of
will be your last one, Chad.
Okay, last one. It's kind of fun. I know you've worked with Brinke Stevens on a couple of films, and she's a horror legend, horror royalty even. What is it like working with her?
Oh, man, she's fantastic. I mean, it's one of those things where they get there, they have she has such a great energy and very, positive. And then she's a good actress. She looks great on film. The camera likes her. All these certain things that click, and you're like, oh, this is a no-brainer. 2 takes, she's great. She's done. Thank you. Hug. Goodbye. Call her up for the next one. And it's the same thing on each show. And you just, if everyone had that energy, it would be, a joy. And I try to surround myself with those kind of people. That's why I work with a lot of the same cast and a lot of the same crew, because they have a good energy and they're not going to be a pain in the ass. And that they're going to give 110% and they're going to love being there and they're not going to complain or whine about shitty food or whatever it might be. And you just it just makes everyone more creative and happy. And it just, before you know it, it's over. And I tell everyone that it's like, look, Richard Ramirez, it's a tough fucking project. It's, no doubt about that. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done or will do. And, but at the same time, it's a 2-week shoot. So when any actor tells me, oh my God, this is going to be tough, I've got to do this, I'm like, look, man, it's going to be over before you know it. And then it's going to be done and it's going to be either great or it's going to be a piece of shit. But it'll be over nonetheless. And that moment of pain and, frustration or whatever it is, instead of letting it get you down or whatever it is, just be like, it's going to be over soon. But on the other side, take that, if it's a good shoot and it's a good energy and you're all having a good time, it's one of those brief moments where, again, it's also over and you hold it as a positive experience and a positive, energy that you kind of take with you to the next project, and you do it. I mean, I did a film called Parasites that was shot all downtown in night shoots from, like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. for a week with the scummiest of the scum of the fucking earth. And it was one of the toughest shoots I've ever been on. But at the same time, it was such a film that I'm so proud of, because it was, there's a film called The Naked Prey that's a huge inspiration to me, because I saw it as a kid with my father, on TV, and it was just stuck in my mind, this guy being chased across the African plains buck naked. And I'm like, so for me, all those moments of pain and misery are just over, because you're like, you made something you're proud of, or made a new friend or a new crew cast member, like Bring Stevens, that you're like, I want to work with her again and again and again. And I think that's the joy of film and making these, whether they're a tough experience or an easy experience. It's the people you meet and the reception it gets, and all these things combined. Being here, talking to you guys, I mean, these are great things that I never in my wildest dreams would have thought I'd be here doing this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
I like how darkly positive.
Well, Chad,
you are.
thank you so much for your time. And
well, you
answering our
gotta be.
questions.
It's like, look. I gotta be honest. There's one of the things. My whole life, I've always been suicidal. And just whatever, fucked up childhood, all those things. But cinema has taken me out of the depression of it. Look, I'm still a pain in the ass. I'm still grumpy. I'm still an old man. All these things. But I try to look at the positive things, especially the older I get. And it's like, look, everything's getting you down. Pop in a Blu-ray of whatever and just kind of go back to whether it's your childhood or something in a cinema that really makes your heart pump, and whatever it is. And it kind of, pretty soon you're forgetting about all of your troubles and your woes and whatever. So to me, cinema is such a great thing. It's a lifesaver, not only for my career and, putting a roof over my head, but also from keeping a shotgun out of my mouth all the times that, I was ready to end it for whatever odd little reason it might be. A girl dumped me, or, I'm broke, or all those little things. Trust me, life will get better. You just got to keep your chin up, work hard, and just do what you want to do, whether it's writing a book or painting a picture or making music or, anything. Just do it, or shoveling shit in a horse stall. Certain things that, if those are things you enjoy doing, go out and do it and do the best you can at it, and don't let life get you down.
Fuck yeah.
Well said.
Fantastic. Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you again for your time. Thank you for answering our questions and hanging out with us. Do you want to tell people what they can get excited about next from you? You kind of mentioned the Night Stalker a little bit, but you want to end giving us a glance at what's coming up.
Sure. We're shooting, Night Stalker in February, and then we're shooting Samuel Little, which is you look him up. He's a real winner. In May, and then we're doing Night Stalker Volume 2, which covers the Ramirez trial and his marriage and his death in prison and all that kind of stuff in August. And then after that, who knows?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and that's all we have for you tonight. So thank you again for your time.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Awesome, Chad. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Great seeing you again.